The morning light spilled through the floor-to-ceiling windows of my office, bathing the polished oak desk in a soft golden glow. Outside, the Manhattan skyline stretched endlessly, glass towers catching the sun, each one a reminder of how far I had come. I leaned back in my leather chair, the silk of my blouse whispering against my skin, and tried to ignore the faint vibration of my phone on the desk. Another message. Another reminder of the past I had tried to bury. I hesitated before reaching for it. My manicured nails tapped lightly against the screen, almost as if my body knew the truth before my mind could register it. The name flashing across the screen froze me in place. Dad. For years, I had kept him at a distance. Ever since that day, the day of my college graduation, when he disowned me in front of my entire family, his voice had been nothing more than a ghost in my head. I built my world without him, piece by piece, brick by brick, fueled by the memory of his rejection. But here he was, suddenly alive in my life again, his message short, almost desperate. We need to talk. It's about your brother. A bitter smile tugged at the corner of my lips. My so-called brother. The one he had chosen over me. The one he paraded as his real son. And now, the truth I had carried for years pressed at the edges of my silence, daring me to finally let it out. I can still remember that day as if it were etched into my skin. My graduation cap itched against my scalp, the tassel brushing annoyingly across my cheek every time I turned my head. The air smelled of cut grass and sunscreen, the stadium buzzing with laughter, cheers, and the occasional blaring of an air horn. Everyone looked so proud, so ready to celebrate the beginning of something new. Everyone except my father. I had spotted him in the crowd, standing stiff in his pressed navy suit, his arm around the boy he called his real son. Tyler. My cousin. My uncle's child. I didn't know not then what I know now. All I knew was that my father had started pulling away from me months earlier, his warmth cooling into indifference, his calls growing shorter, his eyes always drifting toward Tyler. I thought it was in my head, until that day proved otherwise. When my name was called, I walked across the stage with trembling hands clutching my diploma. I searched for him, hungry for approval, for just one proud smile. Instead, he looked past me, his eyes locked on Tyler, his lips curling into a grin that was never meant for me. After the ceremony, when families gathered with flowers and hugs, I approached him, hope still fluttering stubbornly inside me. Dad, I said, my throat tight. We did it. His reply cut deeper than any blade.
We?
No, Emily.
Don't make this about you.
I'm proud of my real son. His hand squeezed Tyler's shoulder, as if sealing the words in place. The sting was immediate. My cheeks burned. The crowd around us seemed to blur, their laughter a cruel backdrop to my humiliation. My hands shook so violently I almost dropped my diploma. I wanted to scream, to beg, to demand answers. Instead, I stood frozen, my throat locked, my heart shattering quietly inside my chest. And then he said it, words that would haunt me for years. You're nothing to me now. That was it. No apology, no hesitation. Just a verdict. I stumbled back, vision clouded, until I felt a gentle hand on my shoulder. My grandmother, her wrinkled eyes fierce with love, pressed something small and cool into my palm, a silver locket she had worn for decades. Don't let his blindness define you, she whispered. One day, he'll see who you really are. Until then, hold your head high. I closed my fist around the locket, the metal digging into my skin, and made my choice right there on the grass. I would not chase after his love again. If he wanted me gone, then I would build a life so vast, so undeniable, that he would choke on his own regret. Leaving the stadium that day felt like walking out of my old life and into the unknown. My father's words echoed in my ears, each step heavy with humiliation, but also strangely liberating. If I was nothing to him, then I had nothing left to lose. The first few months were brutal. I moved into a tiny studio apartment in Queens, the kind with peeling paint on the bathroom tiles and a single window that overlooked an alley. I worked late-night shifts at a diner, scrubbing syrup from sticky tables, my shoes always smelling of grease. By day, I pounded the pavement, applying to jobs I wasn't qualified for and internships that barely paid bus fare. There were nights I cried myself to sleep, clutching that silver locket my grandmother had given me, whispering her words like a mantra, "Don't let his blindness define you." One afternoon, while balancing 3 trays at the diner, I served a woman who would change everything. Her name was Rebecca Mitchell, a sharp-eyed executive with a voice that carried authority without raising in volume. She watched me juggle orders, resolve a customer complaint, and still smile through exhaustion. At the end of her meal, instead of a tip, she slid a business card across the table. "You've got grit," she said simply. "Call me." That call became the beginning of my new life. Rebecca brought me in as an assistant at her marketing firm, the lowest rung on the ladder, but to me, it felt like stepping into the light after years in darkness. She didn't coddle me. If anything, she was relentless. I spent countless nights hunched over glowing screens, learning to build campaigns, write pitches, and decode client needs. I made mistakes, plenty of them. There were moments I wanted to quit, convinced I wasn't cut out for more than diner shifts. But Rebecca saw something in me. "Failure is only proof you're trying," she would remind me, handing back a draft marked with red notes. "Keep going."
So I did.
The first win was small, landing a boutique clothing store as a client and helping them triple their online engagement. The second was bigger, spearheading a campaign for a regional food chain that went viral, my name whispered in meetings I wasn't even invited to. By the time I was promoted to account manager, I had enough savings to move out of that cramped studio and into an apartment with a view of the skyline. Still, I stayed quiet about my success. I posted the occasional modest update on social media. New job, grateful for opportunities, but never the truth of how far I was climbing. I didn't want my father or anyone in that family to know. Let them think I was struggling. Let them believe I had vanished into insignificance. The secrecy became my shield, my private rebellion. Years blurred into milestones. My own marketing firm was born in a co-working space with borrowed furniture and second-hand laptops. Within 3 years, it had grown into a powerhouse, handling clients that once laughed at my inexperience. I had employees who looked to me for guidance, contracts worth millions, and a name that carried weight in rooms my father could never imagine entering. And yet, even with all of it, the corner office, the tailored suits, the champagne toasts, every so often, I'd feel the sting of that day, standing on the grass in my cap and gown, hearing his voice say, "You're nothing to me now." It was the wound that never healed. And the secret I carried about Tyler, that he wasn't my father's son at all, remained locked inside me, waiting for the day it would finally matter. The message from my father sat like a stone in my stomach for days. "We need to talk. It's about your brother." I almost deleted it a dozen times, but something, maybe stubborn curiosity, maybe the universe's cruel sense of timing, made me reply, "Come to my office." Friday, 10 a.m. When the day arrived, I made sure everything was perfect. The glass walls gleamed, the leather chairs polished, the art on the walls tastefully lit. My office wasn't ostentatious, but it radiated quiet power, the kind you couldn't fake. I sat behind my desk, the silver locket resting against my collarbone like armor, and waited. At exactly 10, the door opened. My assistant announced them with professional calm, but her raised brows said it all. The group looked out of place in my world. My father walked in first, his once commanding presence diminished by age and stress. Behind him trailed Tyler, tall and cocky but with shadows under his eyes, and my aunt, my father's sister-in-law, her lips pressed into a tight line. For a moment, no one spoke. They just stared at me, at the sweeping skyline behind me, at the framed awards on the shelf. My father's eyes darted across the room as though searching for proof this was a rented space, a borrowed life. Finally, he cleared his throat. "Emily," he said, his voice uneven. "You've done well." I leaned back in my chair, folding my hands. "Better than you expected, I'm sure." Tyler shifted uncomfortably. "We wouldn't be here if it wasn't serious," he muttered. I arched a brow. Oh, I'm aware. You didn't come to congratulate me. My father exhaled sharply. Tyler's in trouble. Financial trouble. Legal trouble. We need your help. You have resources.
There was the ask.
After years of silence, of being nothing to him, now I was suddenly useful. I let the silence stretch until it became unbearable. Then I said softly, interesting. You spent years parading him as your real son. Your pride. Your heir. And now you're here in my office, asking me to save him. My aunt bristled. Emily, this isn't about the past. This is family. A laugh escaped me, low and sharp. Family? That's rich. I stood and walked to the window, the city sprawling beneath us. My reflection in the glass looked calm, but inside, my heart pounded with the weight of what I was about to say. I turned slowly to face them. Since we're talking about family, maybe it's time we stop pretending. My father frowned. What are you getting at? I stepped closer, my eyes locking with his. Tyler isn't your son. The words landed like thunder. Tyler blinked, his face pale. My aunt's hand flew to her mouth. My father staggered back a step, as if I had physically struck him. That's not, he started, but his voice cracked. It is. I cut in, my tone steady. Tyler is your brother's child. You've spent years humiliating me, rejecting me, holding him above me like a crown jewel. And the truth? You raised another man's son while disowning your own daughter. The room froze. Tyler looked at my aunt, horror dawning in his eyes. Mom, is this true? Tears welled in her eyes as she nodded, unable to speak. My father's face crumpled, the arrogance draining out of him, leaving only a broken man. All these years, he whispered, collapsing into a chair. I let the silence hang, savoring the reversal. For once, the power was mine. You want to talk about your son? I said finally. Now you know the truth. The question is, what are you going to do with it? They had come expecting a savior. Instead, they had found the reckoning. For a long moment, none of them spoke. The silence stretched thick and heavy, the kind that presses against your chest and makes it hard to breathe. My father sat hunched, his hands gripping the arms of the chair as though he might fall without the support. Tyler's jaw was clenched tight, his eyes darting between me and his mother like he had just discovered the ground beneath his feet wasn't solid. Finally, my father whispered, Emily, please, help us. Help him. I tilted my head, studying him. This was the same man who, on the most important day of my life, had looked me in the eye and declared me nothing. And now he was begging. The irony was almost poetic. You want my help? I said slowly, savoring the weight of the words.
Fine.
But things will not go back to the way they were. I'm not the forgotten daughter anymore. I set the conditions now. My father swallowed hard, but nodded. Anything. I turned first to Tyler. You've coasted your entire life on lies, lies you didn't even know existed. If you want my help, you're going to start from scratch. No more hiding behind my father's name. No more shortcuts. You'll get a job, earn your own money, and learn what it feels like to stand on your own. If you refuse, you'll face your troubles without me. Tyler's mouth opened, then closed. For once, he had no clever retort. He just nodded, defeated. Next, I looked at my aunt. She flinched under my gaze. You carried this secret for decades, I said evenly. And in doing so, you let my father destroy me while protecting yourself. If you want forgiveness, it won't come cheaply. You need to tell the truth, to everyone. Not just in this room, but to the rest of the family. No more shadows. No more hiding. Tears slid down her cheeks as she whispered, I will. Finally, I faced my father. He looked smaller than I'd ever seen him, his shoulders sagging under the weight of years of arrogance turned hollow. You disowned me, I said, my voice steady. You told me I was nothing. That wound doesn't vanish because you're desperate now. But I'm not cruel. I'll help under one condition. You acknowledge what you did.
Publicly.
To me, to the family, maybe even to yourself. You admit that you broke your own daughter, that you chose pride over love, and that you were wrong. His eyes glistened, his lips trembling. Emily,
I.
don't say it unless you mean it. I cut in sharply. I don't need empty apologies. I need the truth. The same truth you forced me to live with for years. The room pulsed with silence. Then, slowly, he nodded, tears streaking down his weathered face. I was wrong, he whispered. So wrong. For the first time in my life, I believed him. I stood tall, the locket cool against my skin.
Good.
Then we'll start there. But understand this. I'll never go back to being the powerless girl you left behind. From now on, I decide who gets my help, who earns my trust, and who deserves a place in my life. Their faces said it all: shame, guilt, shock, and maybe, just maybe, the beginning of change. The days that followed felt almost surreal. For years, I had dreamed of a moment like that, when my father would finally see me, when the truth would strip away the lies that had buried me. But instead of triumph, what I felt was something quieter, heavier: release. Tyler called me a week later. His voice was stripped of arrogance, uncertain in a way I had never heard before. I got a job, he said simply, at a construction company. It's hard work. For the first time, I heard sincerity in him. Maybe struggle would build him into something real. My aunt sent me a letter, handwritten, shaky with emotion, confessing everything to the extended family. She didn't beg for forgiveness, only offered her truth and her shame. It was messy, but it was honest. And my father, he came to my office once more. No entourage, no bravado. Just an old man carrying regret like a weight on his back. He handed me a small box. Inside was a faded photograph of me at 6 years old, smiling wide, my hair tied in crooked pigtails. On the back, in his handwriting, it said, "My daughter, my pride." He looked at me with tear-filled eyes. I should have meant it then, but I mean it now. I didn't rush into his arms. I didn't let years of pain vanish in a single gesture, but I nodded. It was a beginning, not of the relationship we once had, but of something new, fragile, and cautious. That night, I sat by my window, the city lights glowing like scattered diamonds across the dark. I held the silver locket in my hand, its metal warmed by my skin. My grandmother's words whispered back to me, "Don't let his blindness define you." I realized she had been right all along. His blindness never defined me. My strength did. My choices did. My ability to rise from the ashes he left me in, that's what defined me. I smiled softly, closing the locket and setting it beside the photograph. For the first time, I felt complete, not because he had finally seen me, but because I had seen myself all along. And as I whispered my final thought into the quiet of my apartment, I knew it was the truth I had earned every step of the way. I was never nothing. I was always more than enough.